The parietal cells inside of the stomach are responsible for secreting the proton and the chloride ion that combine to make the hydrochloric acid. Inside of your parietal cell, you have water. And that water splits into a hydroxide and a proton. Okay? This hydroxyl group, right, will combine with carbon dioxide and it will form bicarbonate with the assistance of carbonic anhydrase. And what happens is this bicarbonate is transported out of the cell by an antiport channel that brings a chloride ion into the cell. So what happens is that our chloride concentration increases inside of the cell, and that will move across the cell into the lumen of the stomach. So this is our lumen up here. All right. Now, this proton will actively get pumped out of the cell into the lumen with an antiport with potassium. So this, right, is going to use ATP. This is an active process that does so. And then once our potassium is inside of our cell, right, it will flow back out through a uniport channel. Okay, so notice that our chloride and our proton are secreted independently of one another. And it's inside of the lumen that they will combine to make our hydrochloric acid. Okay? That's really important. Why? Because if we made hydrochloric acid inside of our stomach cells, right? If we made hydrochloric acid inside of here, it would just eat the cells away. But what stops that hydrochloric acid from coming down here and just destroying the cells themselves? Remember that there are other cells inside of the epithelium of the stomach, and those are mucosal cells. And those produce these mucosal droplets. And these mucosal droplets, right, are packed with bicarbonate. Right? And so what happens is we have these mucosal droplets that are packed with the bicarbonate that are secreted into the lumen. And that bicarbonate, that high concentration of that bicarbonate, comes from our parietal cells, right? So it can sit in a high concentration out here in the ECF and then be picked up by our mucosal cells packed inside of our mucosal droplets. So what that does is it creates this like barrier along the epithelium. It's known as the mucosal barrier. So what will happen is you will have sort of your parietal cell over here, and it will secrete its proton, and it will secrete the chloride ion, and they will combine to form that hydrochloric acid up here. So that hydrochloric acid does not come in contact with the tops of the cells. So those are protected by that mucosal barrier. Right? So this mucosal barrier and high bicarbonate content in that mucosal barrier here prevents that hydrochloric acid from eating away at your own cells. So when we talk about one of the problems that we had to overcome was this autodigestion, right? This is one way that we prevent hydrochloric acid from attacking or degrading our own cells. Okay, so the other thing that you have to remember is that our proton here in our hydrochloric acid comes from water, right? So we need to make sure that we have a high water content, right? We're not dehydrated because that proton comes from that water.